What if I told you that thousands of women and men were accused of dancing with the devil, casting spells and flying through the night, all because they didn't quite fit in? Witchcraft. It's a word that conjures images of broomsticks, black cats, and cauldrons bubbling over. But behind the myth lies a history soaked in fear, fire, and forgotten voices. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a spellbinding topic, the real history of witches. This isn't just about pointy hats and Halloween costumes. The story of witches is a story about power, who gets to have it, who's afraid of it, and what happens when society decides someone is dangerous simply for being different. So grab your potion or your popcorn and let's unravel the dark, misunderstood, and fascinating tale of witches throughout history. The roots of witchcraft, ancient fears, and folklore. Long before the witch hunts and the trials, people around the world believed in magic. In ancient Mesopotamia, spells and incantations were everyday tools. Healers, midwives, and priests used herbs, charms, and rituals. Not all were trusted, especially those who worked alone, outside of temples or royal circles. In ancient Greece and Rome, witches were both feared and admired. The famous witch Circe from Homer's Odyssey turned men into pigs. But she was also a goddess of transformation. Sorcerers, oracles, and necromancers walked a fine line between the sacred and the profane. So where did things take a dark turn? Early Christianity and the rise of the devil. As Christianity spread across Europe, it brought a new framework: one God, one truth, and one very real devil. Pagan practices like herbal medicine, fertility rituals, and seasonal festivals were suddenly seen as dangerous. Many of the women who practiced folk healing or midwifery were labeled as witches, seen as consorting with dark forces. By the 5th century, church leaders began linking magic with heresy. Witchcraft wasn't just odd or suspicious, it became satanic. And that belief would lead to centuries of terror. The witch hunts begin. Europe's dark obsession. Between the 15th and 18th centuries, Europe went through a witch-hunting frenzy. Over 100,000 people were accused, and tens of thousands were executed, mostly women. Why? A perfect storm of fear and control. The printing press spread terrifying pamphlets about witches and devils. Plagues, famine, and war pushed people to look for scapegoats. And religious leaders? They claimed witches were working against God. One of the most infamous manuals, the Malleus Maleficarum, or Hammer of Witches, published in 1487, became the go-to guide for identifying, interrogating, and executing witches. And the torture? Brutal. Confess or die. And if you confess, well, you probably die anyway. Salem and the New World Panic. You've probably heard of the Salem Witch Trials in 1692, right? In a small Puritan town in colonial Massachusetts, fear took hold when young girls claimed to be afflicted by witchcraft. Accusations spread like wildfire. Over 200 people were accused. 20 were executed. It was paranoia, politics, and personal grudges wrapped in religious righteousness. Even a few skeptical voices couldn't stop the madness until it burned itself out. Salem became a tragic symbol of what happens when fear outweighs reason. Why were witches almost always women? Great question. Throughout history, witches were overwhelmingly women, often older, widowed, outspoken, or simply poor. These were women who lived on the margins of society, who didn't fit the mold, who couldn't be controlled. In a deeply patriarchal world, that made them targets. Calling someone a witch was a powerful accusation. It silenced, isolated, and condemned. But not always. In some cultures, witches or wise women were protectors and leaders. The line between fear and reverence was razor thin. From witch trials to witch icons. By the 18th century, belief in literal witchcraft began to fade. thanks to the Enlightenment and the rise of science. But the idea of the witch never disappeared. In fact, it transformed. In the 20th century, witches were reimagined in pop culture. From The Wizard of Oz to Harry Potter, from villains to heroes. Today, witches are often symbols of feminine power, spirituality, and even rebellion. Modern witchcraft, like Wicca or eclectic paganism, is a growing movement rooted in nature, ritual, and self-empowerment. Witches, it seems, have outlasted every attempt to burn them away. So, the next time you see a witch on screen or in costume, remember, behind that image is a rich, tangled history of fear, faith, and resilience. If you enjoyed this journey through time, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more history stories that bring the past to life. Got a topic you want us to cover next? Drop it in the comments. Until then, stay curious, and maybe keep a broomstick handy, just in case.